You're listening to the Outdoors Channel.
Who? What? Yeah!
Woo! I think it's a splendid idea.
Hello and welcome back to the Outdoors Station. Yes, the Outdoors Station. A new name which we've had to adopt due to legal reasons. Over the next few weeks, our website and content will be rebranded, ready for a fresh launch in 2007. You'll find us over at theoutdoorstation.co.uk very soon. So, don't worry, we haven't gone away, we're just rebranding, and we'll be back at full strength very soon. In the meantime, book club host Andy Howell has been holding it all together and been working away with some exciting new interviews. So sit back and enjoy an interview with Colin Saunders, all about the Tatras Mountains.
Welcome back to the book club. A couple of weeks ago I was down in the underground and my attention was drawn to a poster promoting a new destination for one of the country's favourite cut-price airlines. This one made much of the fact that it was handy for exploring the Tatras Mountains, and I have to confess that although I knew the Tatras was somehow connected with Poland, that was about the extent of my knowledge. So a couple of hours later, when I found myself wandering past Stamford's bookshop, I decided to pop in and see what else I could find out about this European mountain range. Well, I was in luck, and I came away with a copy of the new Cicerone guide to the high Tatras Mountains of Slovakia and Poland. And very interesting it is too, so much so that I've added the Tatras to that list of mountains to explore over the next year or so. I was so fascinated that I wondered whether Colin Saunders, one of the co-authors of the guide, would be interested in coming along and talking to us about his guidebook in particular and the Tatras Mountains in general. I'm delighted to say that he was, and I started the conversation by asking Colin just exactly where we could find the Tatras Mountains.
Well, to find the high Tatras on a physical map of Europe, first imagine the Alps in the form of an antique pistol. Its butt lies near the Mediterranean Sea, the handle curves through France into Switzerland, and the barrel stretches on into Austria. The pistol is fired at Vienna, point blank. The bullet leaves the gun and passes over the city and across the Danube, but after travelling just half the barrel's length, it strikes a range of mountains beyond. They're the high Tatras, straddling the border between Slovakia and Poland.
Now, you say in the book that the Tatras are really a kind of undiscovered gem, really. Can you give us a feel about just what it's like walking in them?
Yes, well, it's like a miniature version of the Alps, really. The scenery is very alpine, and the mountains are very craggy, and there are lots of tarns of various sizes, and you can really get all sorts of alpine scenery in just one day's walking.
So they're very tall mountains, aren't they? Even though they're not quite attached to the Alps.
No, they reach over 2,500 metres. That's 8,000 feet, and many of the peaks can be reached by ordinary walkers on waymarked routes, and the routes are very well maintained. Sometimes you have to use various kinds of ironwork, like chains and fixed chains, and for some of the routes, some of the peaks, you have to go accompanied by a mountain guide, a local mountain guide, but I think there are something like 9 of the peaks that you can reach on the waymarked network, and another 11 that you can reach with the waymarked guide.
Now, we're not so au fait with the Tatras, but in fact, there's a very well developed infrastructures in there to support walkers, courtesy of the Eastern European heritage.
Yes, in fact, the earliest resort there, mountain resort, was established in the late 18th century around a spring that produces very tasty and refreshing water, which in fact you can still sample there. but it grew over the subsequent 100 years or so and became quite a popular area for people from all over Europe. But then in the 20th century, the world wars got in the way, and the area somehow ended up behind the Iron Curtain. And then, of course, people from the West stopped visiting it. But during that time, it became very popular with people from behind the Iron Curtain, because it was the only area of high mountains that they could easily get to. But now following the various revolutions and the disappearance of the Iron Curtain, people from the West can get to the Tatras very easily now, and they're beginning to realise what a wonderful area it is.
Okay, so it sounds to be an ideal alternative to perhaps the Alps. Now, it seems to be a pretty compact area, but probably this is, is it ideal for hut-to-hut walking, perhaps more than wild camping?
Well, there are certainly mountain huts there. It's not such a extensive number of mountain huts, obviously, because it's a smaller area, and there's really only one or two hut-to-hut tours that you can do in practice because of the limited choice of mountain huts. But I think the vast majority of people that go there really stay in the resorts, because it's very easy to get up into the mountains from the resorts because of the very good transport that there is in the area. So
you'd stay in one of the villages and travel out every day for a different walk, I guess. And the walks are well described and laid out in the book. It's an area where you're either going to be walking on the Slovakian side or the Polish side, or is it possible to cross between the two?
Well, it is possible now. Until recently, you couldn't do that. You used to be able to, I believe, until 1981 without any restriction, but then the Czechoslovak authorities got very concerned about the situation in Poland with the I can't remember what the Lech Wałęsa, whatever that organisation was
Solidarity,
called.
Yeah.
Solidarity, that's it. The Solidarity movement, they got very concerned about that and closed the border. And it's only a few years ago, and I think in 2001, that the border was opened at one point. I'm talking about the border in the mountains now. There have been road crossings that you can do, but in the mountains there was they opened up the border at a mountain summit called Risi, which is the only summit shared by Poland and Slovakia. And in fact, it is the highest summit in Poland. It's not the highest in Slovakia, but it's the highest in Poland. And of course, it got a lot of visitors. But between 1981 and 2001, there were border guards there who had kept their eagle eyes out to see which side you were coming up from and made jolly sure you went back down the same way. But now they have opened up the border and you can cross it there at Risi. But of course, it's not something you should just do on the spur of the moment, because otherwise, if you end up on the wrong side of the border, you might find yourself stuck without the right money and the means of getting back to where you're staying. So you should only do it with a bit of planning beforehand, and that seems to have worked for several years, and the authorities are now considering opening up other crossing points in the mountains, which will be great news. It'll open up a lot more possibilities.
Presumably it's quite a boon to the local economy, I guess. Yes,
the area, when I first went to this area in, I think it was 1986, it was very obviously despite the fact that it got a lot of visitors from Eastern Europe, there was a distinct lack of prosperity in the area, and now that it's opened up more, the people obviously are much more prosperous, they're much more friendly and open. Many more of them speak English now, and it seems to have worked wonders for it.
So we're staying in villages where all of the services are there, presumably good range of accommodation, food is reasonably easily to get hold of. They're good base camps, are they?
Yes. People sometimes ask me what the difference is between the Slovak side and the Polish side. And the Slovak side, there's a distinct difference in the atmosphere, and being diplomatic, I wouldn't say which I prefer, but they are different, and they're one appreciates the different nature of the Slovak side, which has several small villages strung along the foot of the mountains, and the Polish side, which really has just one large resort, that's Zakopane, which is quite cosmopolitan and has lots of facilities there, although there are some of the surrounding villages of Zakopane are now beginning to become developed.
So you've got the best of both worlds, really. You can either stay in a reasonably built-up town or some quieter villages, depending on which side of the border you pick. Now, you talked about chains there. Now, I can hear some people listening to this thinking, woo, but presumably these are no more dramatic than the short chained routes you'd find in the Pyrenees or the Alps.
No, they're just to help you get over the scrambly bits, really. In my experience, I'm no great mountaineer, but I've found that the anticipation of these things is much worse than the actuality of it. So once you're actually on it, on the chain, it's quite easy going, really. Just have to take care and make sure that you have got a good grip on the chain. Well, no. There are some parts where, even on the Waymarked network, where not many people go. And if you want to get away from the crowds, then, or the more popular routes, then it's quite easy to do so. But in fact, the Polish side probably gets more visitors than others, because for the Poles, the Tatras is the big draw. That's where everybody wants to go at holiday time and for weekends. But they tend to accumulate around the honeypots, the more popular places in the mountains, and it's quite easy if you know what the other opportunities are to get away from those honeypots.
Now, you talked about the option of hiring a mountain guide. Is that a relatively easy thing to do? Would you have to arrange that in advance, or are they people you can catch up with when you arrive?
Well, it depends when you go. If you go in the high season, then you might find it difficult to get one on the spur of the moment. So if you go in the high season, it's probably best to book them up in advance, because they do get quite heavily booked. But out of season, you'd probably be able to get a guide, sort of book one up while you're there rather than before you go.
And the guides will be taking you to slightly quieter, more challenging routes, I guess.
Well, on the Slovak side, of course, they'll be taking you to the summits that you can't get to on the Waymarked network. On the Polish side, there aren't any summits that a guide can take you to that aren't on the Waymarked network, but there's slightly different rules in Poland in that any group of 10 or more people that walk there have to be with a mountain guide. Because if your group is bigger than that, you can quite easily overcome that by dividing into two groups. But the mountain guides will certainly take you to lesser visited parts of the route if that's what you want to do. But of course, another advantage of the guides is that they can tell you a lot more about things like the flora and fauna and the history of the area that you might like to know about.
So we don't need guides for the waymarked trails, but there's a certain advantage in using them for higher routes. I mean, would it be a recommendation to make use of a guide for your first trip, or?
I wouldn't say so. No, I would say that there's probably enough choice, unless you particularly want to get to the higher summits in and off the waymark route summits in Slovakia. I would say there's probably enough in the waymark network to keep you going at least for your first visit, and if you like it enough to want to go there again, then think about having guides on your next visit.
Okay, so if you're used to walking in, I guess, the Pyrenees or the Alps or even Snowdonia, you wouldn't have any difficulties with the Tatras?
No, I don't think so. It is pretty steep in places. I mean, like in the Alps, of course, you have to be prepared to keep going upwards for quite a long time, and then, of course, to keep going downwards for quite a long time. And in places, going down can be quite just as strenuous as going up.
Now, if you're walking in the Alps or the Pyrenees during the summer, it can get very hot. I mean, what's the temperature like in the high season or spring and autumn?
Well, it can get, as you say, it can get very hot in the mountains, and but one should bear in mind that once you get to the top and stop, and you're in wind, it can then feel pretty cold. So even though it's hot, and we're talking about maybe the upper 20s, 30 maybe Celsius, then you have to be prepared for have something in your rucksack that you can put on when you get to the top. Otherwise you could easily catch a chill. And also, what a lot of the local people do is they make an early start, because that way you get the benefit of the cooler morning, and you're climbing when it's cooler, and then you can have a good break at a mountain hut or on the mountain top or at a pass, and then come take the easier part of the journey when it's hotter.
Now, another reason for an early start, certainly in the Pyrenees or the Alps, would be to kind of be on your way down by early afternoon because of the risk of thunderstorms. I mean, do you have that kind of weather in the Tatras as well?
That's right, the same applies. It's the usual mountain pattern that thunderstorms tend to come along in the afternoon. So if you do happen to get caught when a thunderstorm's approaching, then the rule is to get down as quickly as you can and take shelter in a mountain hut or somewhere like that.
But an early start in the morning and a bit of planning usually means that you're well off the tops by the early afternoon when the thunderstorms strike.
Yes, that's right.
So tell us a bit about the hospitality that you can expect actually down in the town or in the villages.
Well, people are, as I said, people are much more friendly now than they were when I first went there. And as they speak English, they're more likely to engage in a conversation with you. And I've certainly found that in my more recent visits to the area that people are much more friendly now on both sides of the border. And many of the younger people, of course, having learned English, they want to practice it, and so the English, as usual, are shamed by their lack of knowledge of the other person's language.
And I mean, what kind of accommodation is available, or would you stay at, and what kind of price range would you expect to be paying?
Well, you can have all sorts of accommodation. You can stay in private homes, and ranging all the way up to first-class hotels. They don't. Well, they've just on the Slovak side. They've just opened a 5-star hotel, the first 5-star hotel in the Tatras, and apparently they're planning to convert some of the existing 4-star hotels into 5-star hotels. And some of the international hotel groups are now getting interested in the Tatras and acquiring hotels there. There's not a lot of, at the moment, there isn't a lot in the way of self-catering apartments and that kind of thing, but no doubt that will come eventually. There's not a lot in the way of campsites or youth hostels either. So the range is private house, bed and breakfast type arrangements upwards.
And if we were looking at making use of those bed and breakfast arrangements, is that something we'd have to book before we left, or can you pick them up relatively easily when you're on site?
You can, well, certainly on the Polish side, you can pick them up pretty easily when you arrive, because there are lots of people. You see outside private houses, you see signs that they're in Polish, but they mean room to let or something similar. And or you sometimes see people standing at the station in Zakopane just with a bit of cardboard up saying room to let or something like that. But you do take a risk if you go to places like that, because they're not registered officially, and I understand that you can quite easily be turfed out of those places if somebody comes along willing to pay a bit more. But so it's better to book your accommodation in advance. Certainly in the high season, as I say, if you go in the off season, the chances are that you'll be able to find something suitable on the spot. There aren't the tourist information centres, unlike in this country at the moment. They don't offer a booking service, so you'd have to go to a local travel agency to get accommodation.
I mean, is it possible to book accommodation over the net before you go? I'm just skirting through the book, actually. I can't remember. Yeah.
Yes, there are several. Well, the book gives a pretty comprehensive list of accommodation with their websites and email addresses of individual hotels. There are also booking services that specialise in one country or the other, Poland or Slovakia, that will book accommodation for you online.
Oh yes, I found them now. It looks quite a good comprehensive list, yeah.
And of course there are quite a lot of tour operators that offer packages to the area, and some that specialise in walking holidays as well.
So even if you wanted to walk independently, it'd be worthwhile scouting around the net, having a look at the packages and the various options that are open to you.
That's right.
Now, I think you said a moment ago you first went there in 1986, which is some time ago now. How on earth did you first discover the Tatras, Colin?
Well, I used to work for one of those tour operators that specialised in walking holidays, and part of my job was looking for new holidays, and I was sent out to Czechoslovakia, as it then was, to the Tatras to look for a new holiday there. And at that time, you had to have an official government guide to chaperone you and make sure you didn't get up to anything fishy. And my guide at the time was my co-author, who is now my co-author, Renata Narožná, and she was my allocated guide, and she came from the Tatras, or comes from the Tatras, and was a qualified mountain guide, and so she was able to take me up into the mountains. And then a few years later I read that there was no English language guidebook to walking in the Tatras, so I thought, well, here's an opportunity for me, and I got in touch with Renata, and we decided that with Renata providing the local knowledge and me doing the writing, we should be able to put a book together. And that's how it came about. And the first edition of the book was published in 1991, and the second edition has just been published earlier this year. Cicerone actually decided to include the Polish side. Our original intention was just the Slovak side, but they wanted the Polish side as well. And we were able to secure the services or the help of sort of Renata's equivalent on the Polish side, a gentleman called Janusz Arnold, who has been very helpful.
Certainly it's one of the thicker Cicerone guides for those people that are well used to using them, over 300 pages, and a lot of information here, a lot of information on routes as well, and it's certainly quite inspirational. It's got me thinking about next summer. Now, I noticed from looking at the guide that one or two of the photographs are by Ronald Turnbull, so it's getting a bit trendy, isn't it? Old Ronald has been out there with his bivvy bag, I guess.
Well, yes, Ronald is a fan of the Tatras, and he went out there a couple of years ago with his son, and quite unknown to me, I wasn't aware he was doing that, but he came back and got in touch with Cicerone and said he had these photos, and I found when I was there last, I was unfortunate with the weather and couldn't get up into some of the mountain areas, and it turned out that Ronald had been able to get up there, and he kindly let me use quite a lot of his photos for these areas I couldn't get to.
So there you go, folks. When Ronald isn't writing for Trail or TGO, he's taking his summer holidays in the Tatras, which is no mean recommendation, I don't think. Now, one of the advantages, I think, of exploring this area is that you can also presumably combine it with a stay in one of the cities like Krakow or Bratislava, which certainly come with a high recommendation, don't they?
That's right, yes. You can... there are quite a lot of flights now go from various British airports to Krakow and Bratislava, and also Vienna. Vienna has there are trains that go from Bratislava to Poprad for the Tatras, and some of those trains are extended to and from Vienna, so Vienna also comes into the equation. On the Polish side, it's quite easy to get from Krakow to Zakopane by train or bus. I should mention that it's not, unless you particularly want to, it's not a good idea to take a car to the Tatras, because private traffic is banned from many of the mountain roads, and you'd find that it was a waste of time having a car there, simply because you wouldn't be able to use it very much if you're walking anyway.
So it's a public transport infrastructure all the way. And how long would it take you to get from, say, Krakow into the mountains?
About 3 hours.
And it's about 5 hours by train from Vienna, I think, in the book. Yeah. I realised how close they were this year when I was on the TGO Challenge, and the first person I met at Queen Street Station in Glasgow was from Poland. And I said to him, well, how long has it taken you to get here? And actually, he'd taken one of the cut price airline routes, and he'd actually left after I had done from Birmingham that morning. So it's easily doable in a day.
Yeah.
So you could mix a week's walking with perhaps a few days in Bratislava or a few days in Krakow, which is a fantastic Gothic city, isn't it, which hasn't suffered any destruction in recent wars. or you could extend that for 1-2 weeks, either staying in on one side of the border or crossing over into the other. So quite a lot of variety there, I think.
That's right.
Okay, well, Colin, that's been very helpful. I'm certainly seriously thinking of exploring the Tatras next year or in the next couple of years, and it's a very helpful guidebook. The only thing that concerns me, I think, is the spelling and the pronunciation of the names. I don't think I'd ever get used to that. No,
it's Polish must be one of the most difficult languages to read for an English person, and as I say in the book, the faint-hearted might give up halfway through trying to pronounce the first syllable. But the book does actually give translations of most of the place names. So if you give up with trying to pronounce the local names, you can use the English translations instead.
And maps are reasonably easy to get hold of. I've certainly seen them in Stamford's and at the map shop.
Oh, certainly, yes.
And they carry, as you said, often the English spelling or pronunciation of a word, as well as sometimes the Polish and the Slovakian.
Yes, well, they translate. Some of the maps have translations of place names on the back. It's best to look closely at the choice of maps, because some of them are more English friendly than others. And in fact, my book gives, or our book, I should say, gives a list of all the maps that we knew of, and tells you what the pros and cons of each are, and what territory it covers.
And it's not too difficult to get hold of them. Certainly you can track them down via the book and via the web at Stamford's or the other good online map shops.
Yes.
So, well recommended, I think. The High Tatras, Slovakia and Poland, by Colin Saunders and Renata. I can't pronounce that Slovakian name. And certainly is something that you'd certainly recommend we check out at some point over the next few years.
I certainly do.
Okay, well, Colin, thanks for your time. I certainly well recommend the book, and good luck. Are you working on any other guides at the moment?
Well, most of my guides are about walking in southeast England and London, and I've written the official guidebook to London's Capital Ring, which encircles London for 78 miles, linking parks and open spaces and woodlands, and the guidebook to the Vanguard Way, which goes from Croydon to the Sussex coast at 66 miles, and it's one of the least known walking routes, but it goes through some of the best scenery in southeast England. And in fact, we're just coming to the existing edition of that is really now out of date, and we're doing a new edition which is going to be purely online.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've often thought that must be it must be a good economic option now for some of the shorter run guides.
Yes, well, it means that we can keep it up to date more easily.
Well, certainly, when we were talking the other day, there was a lot of fascinating stuff about the Capital Ring walk, and maybe it'd be good to talk about that on another occasion.
Yes, I hope so.
Okay, I look forward to it. Colin, thank you very much. Well, that just about wraps up another podcast. We've been talking to Colin Saunders about his guide to the High Tatras Mountains of Slovakia and Poland, and that's published by Cicerone and sells for £15.95. We'll be hoping to talk to Colin again over the next couple of weeks, this time about the London Loop, not least because we know that those of you down in the London area and the southeast see that as an ideal opportunity for stretching those legs during the cold, dark winter days. Thanks as ever to Bob and Rose Cartwright from the Outdoors Channel, without whom these podcasts wouldn't be possible. I'm Andy Howell, and until next time, take care and happy hiking.
My thanks go to Andy once again for making the book club what it is and go from strength to strength with some really interesting interviews. There'll be much more from him very soon. Until then, this is Bob Cartwright at theoutdoorstation.co.uk. The new name, theoutdoorstation.co.uk, beavering away in the background and trying to keep it all together.